Welcome to the System Simplified podcast, where we feature top leaders who share stories on how to successfully systemize a business. Now, let's get started with the show.
Hello, Adi Klevit here, the host of the System Simplified podcast, where I feature top founders, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders about systematizing a business. And today's episode is being brought to you by Business Success Consulting Group, where we create, document, optimize, and implement processes and procedures so businesses can grow and thrive. And it's my honor to introduce today's guest for this episode, Kyle McDowell. Hi, Kyle.
Hey, good afternoon, Addie. Great to be here.
Yes, it's great to have you. We're going to have an amazing conversation because, you come from the corporate world, right? But not only the corporate world. You work with big companies, you work with big groups, Fortune 10 companies, and now you are turned into a coach and an inspirational speaker and a best-selling author. So you're going to share with us your principles and what you discovered that can actually work for entrepreneurs as well.
Yeah, I'm happy to. You mentioned it. I spent nearly 30 years in corporate America, and I led tens of thousands of employees. For some context, my last two roles combined, I led north of 30,000 employees around the globe. Wow. And I've always been in operations, and it was one of those things where in a 28-year journey, there's going to be ups and downs. But around year 20, Addie, I realized that something was missing. My apathy for the whole engine, the big corporate America machine, was at an all-time high. I really felt kind of disengaged and disenfranchised, which is ironic because I was disengaged from the very same environments that I actually helped create. Because I drove the culture in those organizations, and I knew, and I could kind of sense what we read about a lot today. I could sense this probably 5-8 years ago, maybe even 10 years ago, this intersection of the baby boomer leadership generation kind of aging out, and then millennials and Gen X is coming into the workforce and aging into leadership positions, and the rub that was so obvious to me that it really compelled me to think differently about how I led. So if I married the fact that I was pretty disillusioned with the whole corporate America gig with an opportunity to do things differently, I had a real gut check moment, and I decided that I was going to lead in a way that I had never led before. I left the role that I was in and just kind of sat on the sidelines waiting for something that would give me the autonomy to lead differently, take on a different approach, and be the leader that I never had, because I was that leader that would bang my fist on the desk, the guy that would raise his voice, results at all costs. Didn't really matter how we got there. But I realized as a result of what I now call an epiphany that I had it all wrong. And the night before I was going to meet with the top 40 or 50 leaders of this new organization that I inherited, I put together 10 sentences at like midnight the night before. And with no pre-planning, and of course, I had no idea it would ultimately result in a best-selling book and bring me to meet with you today. These 10 sentences, each beginning with the word "we," I'm not super creative, so I now have the 10 we's, became the cultural manifesto for that organization and several organizations since then. But more importantly, the business results all improved by nearly every measurable, but the bosses turned into leaders, and the connections among peers became much tighter, and the overall environment underwent a massive transformation. And that's what began my journey for evangelizing these principles and helping other leaders around the world.
That's amazing. Amazing. So let's talk about those principles. So what's the first one?
I have to give a caveat though. Before I dive into the principles, I always share a couple of caveats, and I must do it again. And I can almost hear when I'm on stage, I do the same thing, by the way. I give the same caveat, and I'll do it now, and that I can hear your audience. I can almost hear your audience say, well, yeah, no shit. That's not groundbreaking. So none of these principles are groundbreaking. There's nothing new here. But what it is, and I think as a process guru like you might really understand and it will resonate with you, is that when you align a series of principles, because a principle, as a reminder, is nothing more, by definition, it's a fundamental truth. It is our foundation for a system of beliefs. So I kind of came to the conclusion that one evening that When we have a team of people aligned around a system of fundamental beliefs, and we all have the same fundamental truths, and these are about behavior, right? How we interact with one another, how we treat one another behind the scenes, how we pick each other up. I felt like that was missing. And I think it's missing in most organizations. We teach people how to do their job, but we don't necessarily spend a lot of time helping leaders drive how we should behave in the workplace. And I think that's where a lot of the rub comes. So my first we is the most fundamental of them all. And it's we do the right thing always. We do the right thing always. And I acknowledge it's not groundbreaking, but I will challenge you to find an organization who over-indexes or indexes at all on its pride in doing the right thing, regardless of the scenario or situation. So if we're going to be a team that is striving for excellence, we must commit to doing the right thing always, regardless if it's the easiest thing or the cheapest thing. We're going to do the right thing regardless of any scenario thrown our way.
Right. Good. Second one.
So as a leader or a member of a team, if we're going to do the right thing, I think the absolute number one way to demonstrate that I am doing the right thing is to lead by example. So that's we number two. We lead by example. And the question is not like, am I leading by example or not? Because every one of us, regardless of the number of direct reports or whether we manage people at all, we're leading by example. We're setting an example. The question is, are we setting an example that we are proud and would like to see replicated? Which I think puts a different lens on it. You know, the thing I always like to say is, if there's a documentary film crew following you, is that going to be a best-selling movie, or is that going to be a box office hit, or
a horror movie?
A horror show. So if we're going to lead by example, for me, in a culture of excellence, the absolute very next thing must be our follow-through. And we say what we're going to do, and then we do it. That's we number three. It is, and I'm sure you've seen it. I know it's in big organizations that I was associated with. A lot of internal commitments are made and then not delivered, especially when the boss says, hey, I'll get back to you on this, or I'll look into that for you, or I'm chasing this, right? There's very little commitments. Commitments just aren't really held the way they are externally. So when we say we're going to keep a commitment to a customer, we're obviously going to do that. But I felt, and I've noticed it, that the connections inside, people don't take them as seriously. And it's just like a chain. If one of the links breaks and a commitment's not delivered, the rest is hosed. So we're going to do the right thing, leading by example, and we're going to make good on our commitments. Those are the first three.
Right, and I think also it really also all the basics is the first one. I mean, if you do the right thing, you're also going to lead by example correctly, right? And you're going to basically follow through because that's the right thing to do.
It's exactly right. And that's why we number one is we number one, because it is the foundation. Without it, everything else is kind of a house of cards. So it's got to be stated. And by the way, for your audience, in the book, I go into like some decision-making criteria to help the reader find the right thing, because it's so subjective and every scenario is a bit different. So, but if we're going to make a commitment to keep our commitments and we say what we're going to do, that takes us to we four. And we four is we take action, because taking action and making a mistake is okay. Being idle is not. And I grew so tired of seeing members of my team at all layers of the organization know and understand there's a problem that needs to be addressed, but not taking any action to address it. So, you know, I kind of equate it to this one organization that I would venture to guess every single one of your listeners or viewers have purchased one or more products from this company. And this company has spent billions of dollars on an advertising campaign. And it's not just go win. It's not just be the best. It's just do it. Just do it. Do something. I would rather my team start on something and stumble and fail and make it really ugly than just let this problem sit over in the corner, because we learn from those mistakes and we learn from stumbling. But doing nothing is a recipe for mediocrity, and that is not excellent. Right. Right? So when we, as a leader, encourage our teams to take action, we also need to make sure that we're in an environment where mistakes are not met with swift retribution. And that brings me to we number five, which is we own our mistakes. It is a shame that mistakes in most organizations are viewed as failure, because they're not. Mistakes are an opportunity. As cliche as it sounds, mistakes are an opportunity to learn, and it's an opportunity for continuous improvement. But
No,
when
Kyle,
someone
I'm going to stop you here because you're absolutely
please,
right. And I interviewed many entrepreneurs, and that is a common, I guess, common thread that when they said like they learn from their mistakes. Just I interviewed recently Lisa Roser from 50 Flowers, and she created an amazing organization, two different amazing companies, and we talked about that, about how you grow from learning from your mistakes, right? Because that is very important. But I also like that we learn from the mistakes. So it's not just one person, but it is an organizational activity to learn from those mistakes.
yeah, and it's I truly believe this one is probably more than any other, maybe one other exception. This one is so on the leader's shoulders because you can't expect team members to raise their hand and say they made a mistake if the environment to do so hasn't been created, right?
Right.
So we need our teams to feel comfortable in picking up their hand and say, listen, I blew it. And then we got to be tough on the mistake, not on the person that made the mistake, which is why I quickly and purposely transitioned to we number 6, which is we pick each other up. And there are 2 elements to this one. We pick each other up means when someone stumbles and they've made a mistake, or perhaps they're struggling with something outside of work, right? We all bring baggage. We all have it, whether they're dealing with a sick child or maybe a divorce or, an elderly parent, who knows? But every single one of us is dealing with something externally. So if our team is focused on picking each other up when someone is down or they've stumbled or they've made a mistake in the work, whatever it is, we want to be the team that has our hand extended to pick that person up, because any one of us might be the one day with our hand reaching up.
That's right.
But there's a second component, I think, which is equally important, and it's really kind of isolated to the leader, and that is it's a leader's obligation to propel team members to new heights. It's not just enough to pick them up when they're down. We've got to get them back to the level playing field and then propel them. And my favorite example of this is helping members of the team reach their new heights in terms of their next role, including if they want to leave your team and go do something outside of your organization. And that is met with some side eye sometimes when I say that, but hear me out.
Okay.
When we make a decision that we are invested in our team members' personal journey, not just their professional, but their personal journey. Now, I don't mean you don't need to know all the details and ugliness that goes on behind the scenes in their private lives. I'm just saying if we understand what their personal objectives are, for example, if a member on the team has a side hustle that they are really passionate about, it's something that they ultimately want to do that's separate and away from my team, I want to help them. I want to put them in a position so they can chase that side hustle. This happened to me many, many years ago. I had an employee come to me and say, Kyle, I have an opportunity at another organization. It's a salary that you probably can't match. It's a title I know you can't match. And I've got 1 or 2 more interviews, and I think this deal is going to get closed. And he expected me to do the typical boss thing and shut him down. You're dead to me. Like, I've moved on, and minimize our relationship. And I didn't do that. I said, hey, man, let's go over your resume. I want to make sure it's as tight as possible. And let's do some mock interviews. And we prepared. I helped him prepare for this role, for his next job. Well, turns out he didn't get the job. But how committed to me and connected to me do you think he was after the disappointment of not getting that role? He's like, I got a guy and a boss that cares more about me than about what I can do for his team. So I think that was an epiphany for me, and it certainly was for him. And by the way, this gentleman and we worked together at 3 subsequent companies after this situation. So he followed me to every new role that I took. We have a bond still to this day.
That's amazing. Such an
Isn't that a cool story? Yeah, I can't make that up. And that's what I do. And I've seen it so many times even when someone doesn't express they want to leave the organization, but they express an interest in something else, or I got this side hustle or whatever. It's natural, but it's unfortunate that the boss a lot of times will just treat that person differently afterwards. And I think that is short-sighted. So
I think we've all been guilty of it. I'm sure you've been. I mean, I've been.
Absolutely.
Stuff like, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why, kind of off topic for a moment, but I really encourage in my executive coaching clients is to not take anything that is said to them personally. Because when you take it personally, like this gentleman back in the day wanted to leave, like if I would have taken that personally, like he was leaving me for something I had done, I would have treated him very differently. But instead, I viewed this as an opportunity to help another person, a human being, on their journey, which we're all wired to do. It's in our DNA. Biologically, we have evolved to take care of each other. But something happens when we step into the workplace that is not as palpable or as prevalent as it should be. So I think we got to pick each other up. I mean, that's just a common courtesy, and it's a requirement of being a good human.
Absolutely. So that was number 6, right?
That was 6. Yep. And this is where my caveat is kind of no longer withstanding, because we go from, yeah, no shit, to something a little bit tougher. And number 7 is we measure ourselves by outcomes, not by activity. And I'd be curious to get your take on this one too, Addie, because in my experience, when someone is double booked or triple booked with meetings, or they're racing from one thing to the next, there's too many things and not enough hours in the day. Like, I challenge people to try to draw a straight line from the activity in which you're engaged to an outcome that you have been assigned, or something that's on, I don't know, your annual appraisal, or something that you've been committed to deliver. And when you do that, and you go through this mental exercise or even physical exercise, you recognize that what I'm so bent out of shape over, or what I'm working so hard on, doesn't even connect to an outcome that I am obligated to deliver. My favorite example, and it's a little bit trite, but I love it that my Uber driver puts gas in the car before they pick me up. I'm so grateful for that. That's an activity. The outcome and the thing they're getting paid for is getting me from A to B. I'm not paying them to stop and get gas. And I guess further, if you were to ask any one of your biggest clients, or talk to one of your biggest clients in an open and transparent manner and say, man, I had 13 meetings yesterday, the client is probably going to say, well, how did that advance my cause? What did that do to make our relationship, or the product or service you delivered to me? How did it improve that? And if you struggle to answer that question, I think that's cause for pause. It's like, okay, maybe I'm not doing the things that drive the outcome. And as the leader, by the way, it's really important to make sure your team understands this. They need to understand that you care about the outcomes. Of course, you want to get there in a way that doesn't ruffle any feathers, and you're collegial and working with folks on the team. But at the end of the day, I don't care. I don't care if you work from the beach. I don't care if the job that we thought took 10 hours would take you 2 hours. I'm not going to find another 8 hours of work for you. I focus on the outcomes, not on the activity to get there. It doesn't impress me. Now, that's not to say activity is not important, because it is. It really is important, but it must be connected to an agreed upon outcome.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, that's what we do when we document the processes. We always tie it into a measurement, and something that measures the actual outcome of the process, as opposed to just having a process and activity. So I completely agree with you, and I think it's a very important principle. Well,
it's funny, Addie. I had a hunch you might agree, but this and the next one, which I'll go to in a moment, are the top 2 that I get pushback on. Yeah. And usually those that push back on the activity versus outcome is it's almost every time from memory that it has been someone in an enormous organization. And it's just kind of coded into their DNA at that point that you're not effective, or you're not making progress, or you're not doing your job if you're not busy 9 out of 8 hours intentionally. So, right. So I just think that's a misnomer. And meetings are the worst, right? Inside of most organizations, we'll have a meeting to discuss a meeting, and then we're going to have another meeting to debrief on the meeting before that. And if there was any scope creep, what are we going to do? We're going to schedule another meeting. And I just think we're on meeting overload in the corporate world. But
absolutely. And our listeners are entrepreneurs, and sometimes when you're an entrepreneur, not sometimes, but a lot of times, right? When you have like a smaller team, or you are responsible for your own destiny, you got to push that outcome, because just doing the activity is not going to work. Although some of us have that happening. Like, if I'm busy, I feel like I'm worth something, but it's not.
That's right.
It's the outcome. It's what you're actually producing. Yeah.
Well said. Well said. Exactly right. And we number 8.
Number 8. Yeah. I want to hear about number 8.
Yeah, it's my favorite of them all, but it is admittedly the toughest. It is the toughest to gain traction in a lot of organizations, and we can dive into why. But 8 is we challenge each other. In most environments, the only one allowed or enabled to issue challenge is the person with some authority, the boss. And I'm very careful, by the way, to use the word boss versus leader, because they're not the same thing. But the challenge has typically been reserved for the boss, the leader, the person in authority, which is really a short-sighted way of approaching our business, because the fact is math and physics would say there's no way that one person is going to have all the information to issue all the most effective challenges to take us to excellence. So when I'm building a team and when I'm leading a team, and the way I emphasize this with my coaching clients is we've got to be in a position where peers are challenging peers. Members of the team are challenging the leader. The leader is challenging his or her leader. They come in every direction. Titles do not matter. Now, there's a rule, though. We can't just go around spouting off opinions. Every challenge must be grounded in data or experience.
Right.
So if you and I are heading down a path, let's say you and I are in charge of a marketing promotion. You got this campaign ready to kick off, and let's say Samantha comes in and says, "Hey, wait a second. We took a very similar approach at my last organization for a very similar product launch. And this marketing plan that we're putting together, or we're about to kick off, it was very similar, and it failed at my last org." Like, we have to listen to that. We must take her challenge, or we're setting ourselves up for failure. It's not possible.
I would like to also see why it failed, right? Or like the details.
Data.
And like data, we have to operate on data and not just rumors or some kind of a general comment that alarms you. Absolutely.
Exactly right, man. And so when here's the beautiful thing that I've seen happen with organizations that really go deep on this one. And I saw it. So I'll speak for myself, actually. When I first unveiled this, it was so exciting to watch my staff meetings turn from readouts, the classic staff meeting where I would sit at the end of the desk and my leaders would go around the table giving their updates. And invariably, when one leader was giving his or her update, the rest of the team was, they were down on their phones or they were in their laptop, not even paying attention.
Right.
The beautiful transformation that occurred was when one team member would give their update or ask questions or kind of be on the stage, other team members are now dialed in listening, because they know they are obligated. They're not allowed. They're obligated to ask a question, including challenge, if they hear something that doesn't necessarily pass their sniff test. Because you know this. It's like, just because I run a function or I oversee a department, that doesn't mean I know everything that's going on in that department. And there's a great chance that somebody else might. So those staff meetings became conversations and not readouts. And that's where the real value of We Number 8 comes, is because we get the best ideas on the table. We get all the concerns on the table, and then we collectively go after them. So it's really important. I think we challenge each other is my favorite. As a matter of fact, I've not taken this bracelet off, and I can't tell you how long. I live this one every single day, because, as you know, almost nothing in this life is ever accomplished without overcoming one or more challenges. It's just how things are. That's just life.
Absolutely.
And business is no different, right? No different.
Yeah, no different. Absolutely. Well, what is number 9?
Well, if we are going to agree to challenge each other, we must have We Number 9, which is we embrace challenge. Challenges are going to come from everywhere. They're not just going to be internal like the ones we just discussed. They're going to come from market forces, competitive threats. They're going to come from the boss's boss. They're going to come from everywhere. So let's just acknowledge that this is part of business. As a matter of fact, it's part of life. Right. So we can complain and we can get down and we can be nervous and scared, all these things, but it's not going to change the challenge. So we've got to embrace those challenges, unless we want to be mediocre. If we want to be like average, then don't embrace the challenge and get lapped. And I tell some stories in the book about that, but we've got to have that, or else it's chaos. If we have a recipe that prescribes people to issue challenges, but we embrace challenge, we're going to have a bunch of disgruntled folks, because one must go with the other. Now,
I agree. It's totally together. What's number 10? Right? The last one. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. When you reach number 10. Yeah, number 10 is purposely the very last one, because if we started with this one, it's a recipe for disappointment. And number 10 is we obsess over details. I grew when I was still in corporate America, I was granted or given the unfortunate nickname of the Shredder. And this was because my teams, you know the drill. It's like, I got to go meet with the CEO, or I got to go meet with a client or whatever, put together a PowerPoint or give me a presentation, right? My team would bring these slides to me, and I would find inconsistencies with margins or different font sizes, even different colors. And I would just send them back every time. I'd shred them every single time. And what happened is is really, really powerful in that the work product behind the scenes becomes much, much better, which only positions you to deliver a better work product to those we serve externally, our clients. And by the way, I didn't mention this at the top. That is the spirit with which I introduce these principles, in that these are the rules that dictate how we behave and treat one another behind the curtains, behind the scenes. First, number one, because if we're high functioning and take care of each other behind the scenes, we are so much better positioned to give great service and take care of our customers. And obsessing over details, I think, is a clear indication of the level of care and our obsession for satisfying our customers. So it's all about our work product. It's all about the care and time and energy we put into our work product that establishes the basis for we number 10. So these are the 10 we's. These are you just got the elevator pitch for the 10 we's.
I love it. I love it. I love it, because it makes total sense. And as you said, it doesn't have to be complex. It can be simple, but if you actually apply that works. So Kyle, if people want to find out more about you or work with you or find out more, I mean, I will have a link to the book for sure in the show notes. How can they get a hold of you?
Yeah, so essentially every social platform is at Kyle McDowell Inc. My website is kylemcdowellinc.com. Pretty easy to remember. As we mentioned, the book is Begin with We, 10 Principles for Building and Sustaining a Culture of Excellence. And I love that you asked this, because I'm not chasing followers, man. I'm not a social media person. But what I am is someone who tries to respond to every single message that I get on every single social platform, whether it be someone who's struggling with trying to make a job change or someone who's struggling with an unruly or a difficult boss. Like, that's why I'm doing what I do, is to help those scenarios. So I generously offer those handles in hopes that someone reaches out, because I'm happy to help.
Absolutely. And I can see that that's what motivates you, is to help others. So I would encourage our listeners to find the book, get a hold of Kyle, find out more, because this is definitely very helpful and something that every business owner should adopt. So thank you so much for being a guest on this podcast. It's been very, very it's been a great conversation, very enlightening, a lot of information and a lot of things that can be applied.
It's been my pleasure. I really appreciate the opportunity to spend a few moments with you and share some of these thoughts and the principles. They've changed my life, and I hear from readers all the time that the impact it's had on them as well. So I'm really thrilled and privileged to share it.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the System Simplified podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.